Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show on our game here. Michael Verney is back after a week off. I'd say you're much the better for it, are you?
I'm refreshed and all, Shane, thank God, yeah. It's funny enough, obviously we're sponsored by Orga Retro as always. I had a fella on to me in the pub in Bird there last week saying, I've been watching the show for X amount of time, whatever it is. He said, how come you never wear a Tipperary jersey? And I said, that will never happen. Shane might wear a Kilkenny jersey. I will never wear a Tipperary jersey. No way.
Would you not? Why not?
No. I said to you, and he said, why? He said, give me the rationale why you won't wear it. And I said, well, my mother always told me after Offaly were beaten in 1984 that when they came back through Roscrea on the way home from the centenary final in Thurles, that all the Roscreans were out with the red and white colours, the Roscrea colours, jeering them on the way home. And you know when something just stays in your head and you're like, all right, that's a bitterness that's never going to go away. That's in my head now and will never go away. So no, never.
Yeah, like I suppose you're not relevant enough for anyone to be worried about wearing an Offaly jersey. No, I'm only joking. I think Offaly people know I'm messing there. I think if we were still in the height of the Kilkenny dominance, I probably wouldn't have worn a jersey like I did for the Michael Fennelly last week. Or if Cork were winning Everton, I'd find that tough because growing up, obviously, I wouldn't have been too much of a fan of Cork. Same with Galway. The Matties back in the day as well. Is that a nickname that's kind of gone by the wayside? Galway been referred to as the Matties.
Geez, I tell you, that's a new one on me, Shane, I have to say. I don't recall that. No, I don't. No, that doesn't ring any bells to me, to be honest with you. But ye would have had, we obviously played them a lot, but ye would have had, there was never a hatred really between Offaly and Galway because we're so close. Portumna is only a stone's throw away from us. But no, there was definitely a hatred between ye and them. So ye would have been more in tune maybe with the different nicknames and stuff like that.
Well, see, this is the problem with bordering so many hurling counties. I mean, on every side of Tipperary, there's someone who's going to absolutely hate you. I actually wonder, would people bring in comments out there? Is there any county jersey that under no circumstances would they put on at any time? So around here, we're sporting orgaretro.com. We've got all sorts of different gear going. And I don't mind wearing it because we've got a great sponsor there. And by the way, look at this Mayo training top.
Absolute
Get 10% off with the promo code OurGame. Go to orgaretro.com. It's a beauty. And a little sneaky peek at the old Dublin Bloody Sunday jersey too. I'll reveal that when we're as we go through the show as well. It's an absolute beaut. You wanted to talk about who is the Tom Brady of the GA. Now, some people don't like NFL. I absolutely love it. I'm not going to go into talk about it. But last night, he was playing for the Buccaneers, who he won the Super Bowl with last year. And he'd spent 20 years with the Patriots. He'd won 6 Super Bowls with them. This is the first time he went back to play in Foxborough last night. And it was just like such a massive deal made about it. You know that promo that was put out during the week?
Class, yeah.
Like one of those Adele songs on the other side. You know how it goes. It was absolutely brilliant. And you just love to see that sort of promo done in GA. Obviously, it's improving all the time. But like Tom Brady on his own, he has the social media team. I mean, we're not at that level in GA. I mean, obviously, GA players are promoting stuff or whatever. But this is a different level. You're like paying for Adele's music to go in and getting all this footage and just really slick promos. It's at another level.
Imagine the sneering if someone like Joe Canning put together a promo video if he was coming up against like Davy Fitz, will say, who he would have had in college or something like that. The abuse he would be getting. But I absolutely love that. I don't watch NFL. I don't really have the time probably to watch it, but you do need to invest like an awful lot of time to follow NFL. You know, that red zone thing, which I've jumped in and out of at different times. And I like it, and I love the tactics, and I love how analysed the game is. I find it fascinating. And Brady going back, Brady's 43, I think, isn't he? I think he's 40.
He's 44.
44. So he's obviously going back to against his old coach Bill Belichick, which is just really, really interesting. Then I got thinking, like, who is the Tom Brady, the GA, in the sense of, you know, somebody who just seems to be ageless, never loses their class, is still so revered no matter where they go. And I probably fell back on someone maybe like Tommy Walsh, maybe, who obviously, you know, 9 All-Stars in a row, hurler of the year, finished with Kilkenny in 14. And then obviously Tullaroan are relegated. And for a club player, I don't think there's ever been, you know, comparable, that sort of outpouring of joy for somebody to win in Croke Park as when he did with Tullaroan when they won the Intermediate All-Ireland. And he's still flying it. He was brilliant at the weekend by all accounts. For Tullaroan as they booked their place in the Kilkenny quarter-final, and just kind of a real kind of a revered character. Is there anybody that stands out to you like that is almost ageless and can just, a lot of the time it's, they do it at inter-county, and some guys maybe step away from their club a year or two later, their bodies are maybe just gone. There's other guys that are just able to stay going for like 10, 15 years with their club, which I just think is fascinating, and it's some credit to them that they're able to stay going, a lot of those lads.
Yeah, you know, Stephen Clarkson is one that obviously comes to mind in terms of the agelessness and the duration of his career, because he was going for so long with Dublin. Obviously, he wasn't there this year. But you know who's actually coming to mind? And you're talking about these qualities that everyone loved him. Is actually a career that was cut unbelievably short. Matt Connor, the Offaly footballer. And like, people still talk about him with such reverence. Tony Keady would be another one. Of course, he passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. The thing with Matt Connor is, you watch him play football. Wasn't it 24 when he had to retire after that accident? Yeah. And you watch him play football back then, and he just looked like a different breed altogether. The class, the grace about him, the athleticism about him. He just looked different gravy back then. So I think that's why he's coming to mind, just that ageless quality of how he played back then, even though it was so short.
I think there was, I think Pat Nolan of the Mirror actually put it together. They did basically comparable stats between him and David Clifford at that age of the career, and I think they actually merged the two of them together in this really interesting photo, and they were kind of similarly graceful and beautiful on the ball. That would definitely, like, Matt's absolutely adored in Offaly and adored everywhere else, and he's the one player he would have said, maybe looking back at the 80s, that he'd fit into any generation because he's just kind of pure class. As you were talking there, Tony Brown would have been one that kind of came to mind, somebody who just like was hurler deer in 1998 and just stayed going and going and going until he was 40, and then stayed playing with Mount Sion even for a few years after that. But it'd be interesting to hear who other people's are. Like we talked about, was it Frank Miles the other day, the lad that's playing in goals for is it the CIE team or what team? Is it in Dublin? 70, in his early 70s.
Liam Miles?
Liam Miles, sorry, Liam Miles. Yeah, he's in his early 70s. Like, there's someone who definitely has gone another level and has hit, you know, another 29 years on past Tom Brady. But there's legends like that in clubs all around the country.
Mickey Linden.
Oh yeah, and he's a master. Mickey Linden was a master sprint champion, wasn't he? Many moons after his down career finished.
Yeah, I'm going to run through some of the comments here. Red Lad says, won't ever wear a Mead jersey. Looking good, lads, for a Monday morning. Well, I had a rough Saturday night, so I'm doing well to be all right on a Monday morning. Sean O'Sullivan from Waterford could never wear Kilkenny. Others I wouldn't mind. You mustn't be too far away from the border there. Dahi would never be caught dead in a Kilkenny jersey as a Wexican. Declan Martin says, only the Poddies call Galway the Matties. So we're the Poddies, are we? Jeez, I must have missed that one somewhere along the line. Silver Surfer would never wear another Ulster County jersey other than my own. He's in Antrim there. And then Spieler. Tommy is a media man now, lads. He's class, but I think media hype the life out of him because he's in a press box, which he now. Amazing player, to be fair, but there are plenty of others. No, Tommy Walsh is absolute gent. I mean, great company. Run into him in the press box, surely, but that doesn't mean that my opinion is changed or coloured because of that. Ollie Canning with Portumna says MLA.
Yeah.
Stayed one of the best club players in not only Galway, but Ireland. Owen Kelly's still doing the business too, pure class. Like, Mullinahone topped their group. We'll talk about him later in the week going into the knockout stage of Tipperary. But he's still knocking over the freeze. And I don't know if you've seen it. Mullinahone have this ridiculous away jersey at the moment. It's black, it's red, and then it's kind of just like green electricity all through the jersey. It's nuts. You just,
it's a weird kind of like, it's kind of like a camouflage effect or something weird going on in it. It's really interesting. But Kelly's a really good one because obviously he had a class Tipperary career, but when he stepped away from Tipperary, the guts of a decade ago, with the back issues that he had, like, you would not have thought that he'd still be playing outfield for his club. He'd to step back into goals, didn't he, with Mullinahone for a while as he was dealing with back injuries. And then he scored. Did he get 5 or 6 from play the other day as Mullinahone, I think, topped their group and are through to the quarter? Like, that's phenomenal to be still doing that, you know, considering all the injuries and different kind of ailments that he'd had down through the years.
Yeah, I'd love people got in their comments. Who is the ageless? Who is the Tom Brady of your club or county even? Let us know that. Do you know what? I was obviously people have different interests in different sports, and we already talked about Tom Brady last night. But also, I thought it was very interesting listening to what Jurgen Klopp said after the game yesterday. 2-2 draw between Liverpool and City. God, that Mohamed Salah goal was absolutely unbelievable. But I just thought the commentary or the punditry from Klopp afterwards, where he was explaining the difference between the first half and the second half, was really, really enlightening. Now, City had dominated the game in the first half, and he was obviously trying to watch on and think, what can we change at half time here? Now, we're going to bring this on to GA in a minute, but I just want to look at this bit of analysis from Jurgen Klopp, and I'll just play it on screen here, and I just hope the audio comes up. If you can't hear it, Michael, let me know. But we'll just talk on the back of this, because I just found this quite interesting.
I think we could see you obviously weren't right in the first half. Was it a combination of things? Was it I don't know, was it a lacking in energy, or was it
So first of all, is what you have to say. You play Man City, and Man City with the ball is a proper team. So, but there are obviously, how we saw in the second half, ways to defend it. What you have to do, you have to close down the decisive spaces. For that, you have to step out in specific moments. So you need. So what does City want to do? They want to play through the center. First idea. But if center's closed, they leave the two wingers high and wide, pass the ball there. If it's a big switch or just a pass, when one situation's going in the box, whatever, these kind of things. We never close. I'm not sure I saw a lot of games where City could pass the balls that easy through the half spaces. So between our winger and 8, it was constantly. So what's the reason for that? We were in the last line to passive. We called the midfield line back. So neither Hendo nor Curtis could really step out when needed, when necessary. So we were just passive. They passed the ball through us, they turned, and from there we go. They didn't, obviously, they had chances, clear, but they didn't score from that. But what it gives you is a really bad feeling. This bad feeling leads to not playing football, what we didn't do as well. So then we had these long balls which make absolutely no sense. One or two of them maybe made sense. All the rest, well, not really. I didn't see the reason for it. And obviously, all these things we changed in the second half immediately. You could see we set up, we were higher, we were more aggressive in this situation because we felt closer, we felt more compact, so they couldn't play anymore like they wanted. So we were now in the game. We scored wonderful goals with the ball. The message for the football was play the extra pass. We didn't do that in the first half at all. I'm really happy. But the second half, I'm really happy. It's a strong opponent. Do we want to win a game like this? Yes. But we have to admit today, because the game has two halves, the point is completely fine.
So what do you make of that, the way he's talking about even playing the extra pass and pressing up higher and all those different things? Because it's crucial for a manager to be able to see all that stuff. And I wonder how many people does Jurgen Klopp have feeding the information to him? Now, I'm sure ultimately he's going to get a fairly distilled message, because you can't overload him with information either, because he's trying to decide his substitutions, do 1,000,001 different things. So somebody has to give him fairly distilled information in its simplest form so he can make changes on that. But like, I found that highly impressive, listening to the way he was kind of breaking that down and how they adjusted and readjusted or whatever.
Yeah, and breaking it down in real time as well, because it sounds like it's something that he was breaking down as the first half was going on. He was making these judgments, and obviously, yeah, I'd say he has voices feeding into him. I wouldn't say he has too many voices, because have you ever been in a situation where like 2 or 3 people are just firing stuff at you, and you're just like, just hold on a second now, and just like one at a time and try and take a message from each person or whatever. But I think in a situation like that, you'd see a lot of managers that have that have one person that they really respect just from looking at a game, not necessarily looking at stats. And then they might have a stats-based approach coming into them, the actual facts. Someone who's judging by their eye and somebody who's judging by factual-based information. So I'd say no more than 2 people are feeding into it, and he's obviously making his own opinions on it as well. But one of the most impressive things about it is the fact that he's actually telling it as he saw it. And there's no, like, that's dressing room talk, or that's a conversation that he would have with someone who he really respects their opinion on football. And that's really interesting and very, very honest. It's not something you get from GA people generally. If you chat to someone off the record, you'll get it. But it's rare that someone would come out and give their opinions like that to the world. So I did think that was fascinating. I can't recall it happening too many times in the GA. One would be maybe like, and this was obviously a couple of weeks or even months after, when Liam Sheedy stepped aside from Tipperary, and he was asked in the wake of the All-Ireland final, Limerick winning again for 2 in a row in their 3rd and 4th years, how do you stop Limerick? And he talked about what they did against Limerick and playing 2 centre forwards and this type of tactics that actually happened on the pitch, not just general kind of, spouting kind of nonsense or generalisms or anything like that. Actually, what they did and how they tried to upset Tipperary or Limerick, and he went into detail about it. But to hear Klopp doing that, like just minutes after the match, I do think it was fascinating, and I think that's why he's so revered, because of his honesty, and that's as honest as he's ever been about any game. And I think there's a lot of aspiring managers and players that would pick up an awful lot from that, especially the detail that in his head he was going into as he was forensically analysing the game.
Yeah, well, I suppose his mind is conditioned to doing that from being in charge for hundreds of games. He's probably got his system down to a T. It would probably be like an overwhelming amount of information for most people, but just managers in general are probably used to that. Another point I'd make is 2019, was it 2019 or 2020 county final? I hadn't been talking with Cuala for a while, and I just kind of sat up in the stand for the county final against St. Bridget's. This was the day now that Leo Varadkar was shouting on St. Bridget's, his local constituents there in Castleknock. But there was so obviously the manager, Willie Maher, there, and then there's Brian Horgan was on the sideline, and I can't remember who else, but there was I was asked just to sit up in the stand and see what I might see from up there. Doing all these shows or whatever, you'd have some sort of a feel for GA. But the manager didn't want, so you had the headsets going. The manager didn't want the headset plugged into absolutely everybody. So when I was talking and saying what I was seeing, I was sending it to Brian Horgan, and he might relay it, and he's also down on the sideline seeing what he can see. Then you're trying to put the whole picture together. And then at halftime, you're having a quick little meeting down at the sideline with the manager. So things hadn't been going great. And so there was three or four of us all at the one time, all giving our speak at the one time. So it's a lot for because everyone wants to get out their information straight away. I'm coming over and Brian Horgan's coming over and the manager's there and he has his own thoughts. And then I think there was one other selector. And you have 3 or 4 people all trying to talk at the one time. And then you're trying to distill that information, pick out the most salient point, go into the players and try and get that message across to them. It's no easy task. I'd love people to get their thoughts in on this sort of stuff, what they make of it, who's the best at doing this in real time. Obviously, I think Paul Kinnerk and John Kiley as a combo is going to be mentioned. But it's a fair balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You'd love to, Klopp is doing this at half time. He was obviously thinking during the first half, and he had 15 minutes at half time. I think why people admire Paul Kinnerk so much is he's obviously he is a bit of a mathematical genius. He's probably operating on a different sphere than us mere mortals. But the fact that he's able to analyse that first 17 to 20 minutes and distill a message down very, very neatly and sharply within that minute of a water break. How often have we seen that they've come with a bounce after a water break? It's probably just one quick message. And I think that's the thing. I'm sure that's conversations that have happened between coaches and management the length and breadth of the country. How do we maximise this water break? They probably get their breath for 15 or 20 seconds. And then we have to have, a message that we have taken from that first quarter or from that, that first half, and we have to distill it down in a really, really short period of time, give them maybe 1 to 2 points that they can work on, and then that's it. But that is a bit of an art form as well. Being able to digest what you're seeing, come up with a message, and if it's come up with a solution, as it was at half-time at the Munster final, and be able to come up with that solution quite quickly, and then give it to the players, give what you think should be done to the players, and then put it into practice. But a lot of times, have you seen, and I've probably been part of management teams even when I was younger, where we could be chatting for 10 minutes at half time before we even go near the dressing room. And that's just, it's too much. There's too much talk. You need to be, okay, you have 2 points, you have 2 points, you have 2 points, distill it down into a short message and we go again.
Yeah, absolutely. We're about to bring in Jerome O'Connell from the Limerick Leader here. Just a few more comments in terms of the ageless Tom Brady as people in the GA. Pa Horgan for Cork, definitely. Willie O'Dwyer still doing it for Mulnavat, says Joe Butler. He was their best player in the Shield final versus the Village on Saturday. He must be nearly 40. Owen Kelly is mentioned again. Kieran Carey still playing Junior B with Patrick as well.
Class, yeah.
And Niall Heflin talking about the managerial tasks at halftime, taking complex information and making it succinct and clear is the hardest thing to do in all areas, which is very fair. Jerome O'Connell, welcome. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Shane.
How are you getting on? We're just thinking there, who's the Tom Brady of GEA as far as you're concerned? Is there anyone who's ageless, timeless, just their name carries over the generations?
Yeah, I saw someone mentioning Kieran Carey playing Junior B there with Patrick Swell. I think it's a bit of a star-studded Junior B side, actually. I think Barry Foley's probably playing as well, and a couple of other Patrick Swell greats. I'm going to hazard a guess at saying there could be the close to 50 county senior medals across that junior B side. I think they play a city semi-final this weekend, so could be all looking to add another medal to that galaxy of success they would have had. But I think, while the GA is becoming a young man's game, and we hear it so often, I have noticed across the club championship that there is a couple of late 30s and early 40s still sprinkled across senior sides, and especially at junior sides. And I always think you keep playing as long as you can, and you've seen that with a number of guys. But certainly in Limerick, Niall Moran is still playing senior club hurling. Donald O'Grady, who's Limerick senior hurling selector, is now in a county intermediate hurling semi-final with Granagh Ballingarry as well. So he's still tugging out there at, I think he's still playing centre back for him as well.
Oh, I think Jerome's line is just frozen there for a split second. Actually, now that you mentioned that, Paul Curran, who's just been installed in the Tipperary backroom team, he's still playing with Mullinahone, like Owen Kelly, and he's going to be there for the quarter-final of the Tipperary. You just dropped off for a second there, Jerome, but I hope you can hear me okay there now, can you?
All good, my end, Shane.
Brilliant. Look, just to jump onto the quarterfinals of the Limerick Championship, well, we know now that the semi-final is going to be Patrickswell against Napirsig and Kilmallock against Doon. But the games that we saw at the weekend there, a couple of pretty close encounters. Patrickswell eventually winning 20 points to 18 against Adair, and Kilmallock after extra time winning 133 to 517. A nightmare to do your report there, trying to sum that up, no doubt. What sort of championship have we had in Limerick so far? Has it been exciting as far as you're concerned?
We've had a pretty decent championship. Like everything else, it was curtailed because of COVID. So we've smaller groups. Ordinarily, you're guaranteed 5 group games. This season, you're just guaranteed 2 group games and 1 knockout or relegation. So everyone pretty much got 3 games. It's been quite decent. I think the big thing would be that you mentioned the 4 semi-finalists. It's the same 4 semi-finalists we've had for 5 years now. But I have to say the 2 quarterfinals we saw yesterday are by far the 2 most exciting and the 2 closest that any of the so-called Section B teams would have come to the Big 4 in recent years. To be honest, on Sunday, I would say Adair probably should have won and South Liberties could have won. That said, tradition and experience and just the sheer talent that they would have on show saw Patrickswell and Kilmallock over the line. But really, really decent showings from Adair and South Liberties. And I'm sure they both have regrets this morning. Went really, really close to what would be 2 shocks.
Jerome, did Adair just run out of juice at the end? They were 18-15 up, I think, with 3 minutes of normal time to go, and then Patrickswell hit the last 5. Was it that much of an effort to be in that position that they just lagged at the end, or was it a bit of white line fever, or what did you think?
Yeah, it could have been. This is a young Adair side. You'd have your Declan Hannans and your Wayne McNamara's, John Fitzgibbon. They have experience, but by and large, they're coming with a young side. Brian Foley's gone in there for the last couple of years as manager, doing a good job. They were an old side, and he's managed to nurture them along. They bossed the game for 3 quarters. Looking back at it, Patrickswell scored 5 points in the first 10 minutes, and scored another 5 points in the last 4 minutes. In between that, Adair bossed the game. Probably just didn't have the belief that they could really see it through. And Patrickswell were off colour. Whether you put that down to Adair or you say it was just one of those days. Aaron Gallan didn't score from play. Diarmaid Burns was really, really prominent in the early stages, but probably faded. Just didn't get all their stars playing to the best on the day, and that's the way Patrickswell have been this year. They've been inconsistent in their 3 games to date.
Okay, line just dropping a small bit again there. We'll jump on to the Kilmallock South Liberties game. So I think that's Kilmallock, that's their 10th successive semi-final, isn't it? They're unbelievably consistent. I saw them earlier this year and I wondered, are they quite the same team? But maybe it's a case of just warming up slow after a slow start.
Yeah, they haven't been great. Again, inconsistent is probably what you would say when you think of them. And you mentioned 10 years successive there. Got the likes of Gavin O'Mahony, Paddy O'Brien, Barry Hennessy, Philip O'Loughlin, Mark O'Loughlin, Kevin O'Donnell. they just have absolutely huge club experience across their group. They're trying to integrate a couple of younger players, and probably what Tony Considine and a lot in Kilmallock would love about yesterday was that you had Oisín O'Reilly and Micheál Houlihan as the two guys that maybe dragged them through the game when they weren't firing on all cylinders. And they're two of the younger players in that team, and that's what they need now. They need the new leaders to come in and take over from your Gavin O'Mahony's and Paddy O'Brien's. And they got there in the end. South Liberties kept hitting them for goals, but when you look through the scoring spread, every single time there was a goal, there was either 3 points or 2 points came in really, really quick reply from Kilmallock. And, that's a good sign of a side. And, they're where they want to be. They're in a semi-final. That's where they would have been at the target at the start of the year. Now they get a crack off Doon.
Jerome, have you seen many players? Yeah, to see Oisín O'Reilly was man of the match yesterday with 7 points. Have many players put their name in the conversation for being called into a county squad? It's obviously the most exclusive county squad. It's the hardest one to get into. But have the many lads put their names up for contention?
Yeah, I know where you were going with that question. It's hard to know. Oisín was in there previously. Oisín has an All-Ireland medal from 2018 and just slipped down the pecking order again with your likes of Peter Casey, Aaron Gallan, Graham Mulcahy, Pat Ryan, David Reedy, Barry Murphy. A really, really tough sector of the field to break into from a Limerick point of view. He's been really sparkling, in fairness to him, for Kilmallock this year. So has Micheál Houlihan, famous father there, Mike from the 1990s Limerick team, has been a really good player for Kilmallock this year. 16 points in one of their previous games. Now, obviously taking frees, but in fairness, a large chunk of those from play as well. I like the looks of maybe Jimmy Quilty, who's playing with Blackrock. He was captain of the Limerick under-20s this year. Blackrock just stayed up in the senior ranks with a relegation playoff win over Monaleen the weekend. He's won, as a big engine out around midfield. But I'm sure they're keeping their eyes on a couple of players. John Kiley was in the two Skellig grounds on Sunday to see the two games as well.
I was going to ask you then, Jerome, just about Na Piarsaigh. Are they, obviously they dominated some years and other years not quite as much, but they've won plenty and obviously lots of Munster titles then to go with it. Are they looking as mean as ever? Yeah.
In short, yes, they are. But the remarkable thing is, you look down through their team line-out, played 2 games to date, largely won them, pretty straightforward. No Podge Kennedy in goals, who's been there for, 10 plus years and more. Jerome Boylan hasn't played yet. Mike Casey hasn't played yet. Peter Casey hasn't played. Mike and Peter probably won't play, maybe. Alan Dempsey hasn't seen any game time. All, guys that are number one, straight onto their team sheet. And yet young guys have come in and it's been seamless. Adam McNamara, Emmett McAvoy, William Hain continues to step up. These guys are just coming into the team and it doesn't seem to weaken them in any regard. Now, that said, you're down to the business end of the championship now. So, the quality steps up. So it'll be interesting to see, can they maybe get Jerome Boylan and Podge Kennedy, might be two that maybe fit enough to get back into the team.
Okay, and then we wanted to talk to you about John Kiley and the fact that he got reappointed for another 2 years. Is this something that you felt was in any way, shape or form hanging in the air, that there was any doubt over, or was just this was just waiting to be just signed off on?
I don't think there was any fears really. We never heard of any rumours or anything that he was ready to walk away or that any of the management team had done their time. I think it was just a process that they had to go through. What were we? It was probably only 5 weeks really after the All-Ireland final that the whole thing was made public, that they were back again. And look, it's what everyone would clearly want from officialdom to players to supporters. And I suppose it's great that it's done now and they're going to have a break. And I just noticed over the weekend already the likes of Dan and Tom Morrissey, Kyle Hayes, Sean Finn, they're all now finished their club campaigns for this year. So, they're going to get a nice linty break for them for the next couple of months. And that's going to be a positive for Limerick as well. And especially after next weekend at senior and intermediate level. Another couple of players will be finished with their clubs and get that long break. And I'm sure that, John and the management team would be happy with that as well, to give time to these guys away from hurling at all levels.
Jerome, there's obviously a couple of injuries going into next year. Peter Casey and Barry Murphy will probably struggle to feature maybe at all next year, or maybe they could be back for the latter stages of the Munster Championship. But with the same backroom team in place, and basically they have everything they want to go as far as they can. What's the ceiling, do you think, for the current Limerick crop? Are you looking at, are you realistically looking at 4 or 5 in a row? Or what do you think the ceiling is for that team?
I could give you the John Kiley answer and say that, they're focused on the first round of the Munster League in January. But I mean, look, the reality is you look at the bookies or anything like that. I mean, they're unbackable already for All Ireland next year. And, 3 in a row, we said back to back would be special. It was never done in Limerick. 3 in a row would equally be just as special. And that's the target now. And you're never going to hear that soundbite from any of the players or the management. But it's human nature, and that's what they have to strive after now. But the loss of Peter Casey is significant. Even more so when Barry Murphy, who would have been one of those in line for maybe getting the shot at his position, is also now out of the equation. Graham Mulcahy, has maybe started to get that impact role off the bench. So that's 3 corner forwards that we've had in recent years that maybe won't be starters straight off in the championship next year. So there's an opening there for maybe young Cathal O'Neill. It'll be his second year on the panel next year. Be interesting to see. I've no doubt that he'll get a lot of game time during the Allianz League to see if he can maybe step into the starting 15.
Can I ask you a final thing, Jerome, before I let you go? Now, obviously, you're concentrating on the Limerick Championship there, but Seanie O'Donnell, who's involved with the Limerick backroom team and a stats man, he's involved with Ballygunner as they won their 8 in a row in Waterford there. And I was just looking at the size of the backroom team for Ballygunner, and you can see it here on the right hand side. Let's say the bottom half of that there, a huge amount of names on that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Geez, there's no issue with that. I'm not criticising it in any way, shape, or form. But you see it as a fairly star-studded selection of names in there. But Sean O'Donnell and Seamus Berry with him too. How key has Sean O'Donnell been in terms of what you would have heard? I mean, obviously every person in the backroom team is going to get name checked when somebody wins an All Ireland title, but very specifically around Sean O'Donnell, how big an impact, and what do you hear when you hear about the impact he has, or we're talking about trying to manage on the fly during the middle of a game. What is it about him that makes him so good?
I think there's absolutely no doubt that the best work John Kiley probably did was in the autumn and winter of 2016. He went about putting together a management team and just didn't settle for second best. I think we'll have to wait until he writes the book to know was there anything that slipped through his fingers. But on paper, he got at the time what would have been maybe the best hurling coach around, Paul Kinnerk, best S&C coach around, Joe O'Connor, the most highly sought after analyst in Seanie O'Donnell. And, there were 3 huge figures to put into the one management team when Limerick started out. And Seanie has obviously played a huge role the last couple of years, has a really finely tuned group of guys around him now as well. And I think we saw that during COVID when they were able to work externally from the match, and it's still, it absolutely changed nothing for them. I heard you talking about, the quick decision making earlier before I came on, and it's a huge thing that Seanie and the guys can, I suppose, give the correct and precise information down to Paul and John in real time, and they can make the choices based on that. And I think it was Donal O'Grady, the selector, pre All Ireland final interviews, said that he had met Seanie O'Donnell before training, that Seanie had done something like 15 hours of video analysis work in the previous couple of days. So I mean, it's the small margins that Limerick don't leave to chance, and Seanie O'Donnell is a massive part of that. And I know he's been with Ballygunner for a couple of years as well. Met him down there at Munster club game in recent years. I was Patrick Swell, wasn't it, and Ballygunner. So I mean, he's a huge guy to have into a club setup, and I know he helps out a number of clubs, maybe part time in Limerick, but not quite the role he would have with Ballygunner, but a hugely sought after guy, and as integral part in Limerick as anyone else. And I know Limerick have maybe a couple of roles still to fill, but Seanie O'Donnell is absolutely integral to everything they do.
Yeah, really is incredible. Like 20 people in the backroom team there. I'm sure lots of clubs have that too. I think especially ones that have aspirations of going on and winning Munster titles or All-Ireland titles, there's no doubt Ballygunner do. Now, I might have said it wrong there. Seanie O'Donnell is part of the video analysis there. Stats are Cian Canwell and Mike Power. But anyway, that's just to run through all that. So very much thank you for joining us there, Jerome. And no doubt we'll be catching up again very soon.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Michael.
Cheers, Jerome.
Yeah,
just a word on Seanie O'Donnell, Shane, because I remember being at a media gig in 2018. It was before the All Ireland semi-final, and Dermot O'Sullivan was up at it, and he had spoken. He'd been part of the Cork management team for the previous years, and in fairness to him, he actually, like he said, the deciding factor in that All Ireland semi-final between Limerick and Cork could be Cork's previous statistician. He mentioned Seanie O'Donnell, and in fairness, he was able to break down Cork's puck out unbelievably well the further the game went on, and particularly in extra time that day. And I've met him a couple of times and chatted him a bit, and yeah, like his knowledge of hurling is obviously unbelievable. And the fact that we talked about being able to distill messages down, what you want probably most is the people that are providing you with the messages to be on a similar page to you and be able to be really, really direct. So when Seanie O'Donnell says something, I'd imagine John Kiley will take that as gospel and respects his opinion probably more so than nearly anybody else's. So I'd say he wouldn't be talking for the sake of talking. Any message he's given is very direct and very clear, and there's probably a lot of fact-based evidence behind it as well, and statistical evidence too.
You're talking about breaking down puckouts there, and we're talking about doing it live during the game. And I think this is a good opportunity we'll come back to talking about Waterford and Ballygunner getting their victory. But like Davy Fitz did umpire over the weekend. Now, this is a game between Ina Kilnamona and they were up against Whitegate. So your club manager, Brendan Bugler, plays for them, of course. I don't believe you've had a chance to chat with him since. But the fact that Davy Fitz is doing linesman in a game, umpire in a game where he's part of that championship with 6 Mile Bridge, they're chasing 3 in a row. Kevin Curry he's the referee there, and I just don't think it's right. So Kevin Curry is from 6 Mile Bridge. Obviously, he's a clubman, just like Davy Fitz, and he would have asked him to do plenty of games before. Maybe they're buddies. That's all fine. No problem at all there. But when you're in the same championship and you could end up coming up against one of these two teams, or a decision you make, and let's just, totally innocently, let's say you make a bad call as an umpire. It happens all the time. You might end up knocking out a team that you're going to be playing, or, make a red card call that might massively influence the championship. I'm not saying Davy would do any of that, but I don't think a manager should be in a situation where that could happen. I think I don't agree with that at all. I think if you ask him and if you ask the manager, they'll say, the referee, they'll say, well, look, I couldn't get anyone to do it. And that's fine. And Davy might say, well, look, I was just trying to help out the situation. They were caught. And that is great. But I'm saying that there should be protocols in there or rules in there that a manager can't. I just think there's too much can go wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely not an ideal scenario, but I've been down in our own club, and I've been at other places. Like we started a group game this year, a championship game without linesmen, a championship match in O'Connor Park. There were no linesmen available. So I don't know the exact context of it, but it is very hard to get people to do these jobs anymore. Very hard to get umpires, very hard to get linesmen. I was doing linesman for an under-13 county final in St. Brendan's Park yesterday, and Kilcormac won, and they won well. But and there was no real flashpoints. But I still wouldn't exactly be jumping up and down to do the role based on what's shouted in you at you, and you're never right. It's not an ideal scenario, but I'd say it needs I wouldn't say I'm going to give Davy the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say I wouldn't say he put his hand up to do the job so that he could get a look at potentially a team that they might play, I give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was helping out a clubman who was probably in bother, who probably sent out an 11th hour text to get an umpire for a match because somebody might have let him down. They usually have a team of 4. Invariably, there's 1 or 2 not available at different times, so somebody else steps in. It's funny, Shane, you should say that. I ended up having to umpire a Division 1 league final in Offaly. I think it was between Shinrone and Coolderry a couple of years ago. I definitely don't like umpiring. Whatever about doing linesman, I definitely don't like doing umpire. And we ended up playing, I think, both Shinrone and Coolderry in the championship later on. It could have been actually Shinrone and Rhinus it was. Like if someone had hit someone or something like that, I would have had to put up the hand and say whatever. And that's far from an ideal scenario. Maybe it's a bit convoluted in the sense that I could use that to my advantage if I was that way inclined. But I think with a lot of these things, needs do must at certain times. Like I was just like our chairman came down that day and said, like, we're stuck for an umpire. Would you go in and do it? I was like, it's the last thing I want to do, but I'm not gonna go down to St. Brendan's Park and have one umpire doing a marquee match. So I will help out no more than I helped out yesterday. So I'm going to give Davy the benefit of the doubt and say that that's the scenario that did arise in Clare, but it's not. It's far from perfect. All right.
Oh yeah, but look, I'm not in any way giving out about Davy Fitz here, but I'm just saying this situation should not be allowed to arise. You always have situations where referees are struggling to get people to do the line, to do umpire, and that is a bit of a disastrous situation. And we know that there's a falling amount of referees, even in, I think Fergal Horgan was talking about Tipperary the last few years. It's gone down from having something like 120 referees down to about 80. And we've heard of situations in both Wexford and Tipperary of games having to be called off because there were fewer referees. And how will that affect championships in the coming years in terms of like, well, do we need to play fewer games in a championship? Have like groups where you've only 2 games rather than 3 because we've no one to referee the games. That will be a big problem there. And Traumspieler says here, Davy is a GA man. He should be commended for taking the time to do the thankless job of being umpire. Linesmen have not showed up for the Clare County Championship games this year, so fair play to Davy. So as I said, I'm not slating him at all, because people can very quickly go off on a soul run, but it is an issue.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on that is, but possibly Davy should have maybe realised the potential fallout of that. But you're volunteering to do a job that's totally thankless, and maybe you shouldn't be getting abuse for it. But you could see how you would, given his stature and the fact that he has a really, really vested interest in the Clare Senior Hurling Championship. But the big caveat I will give is it's impossible to get people to do these things now. It's so tough. And funnily enough, Davy was umpiring a game where Brendan Bugler, as you said, my club manager, was playing in. Yesterday, we played 6 Mile Bridge in a practice match, and the two of them are standing on the sideline against each other again. So, like, it was an interesting weekend all told, I'd say.
And Bugler was also part of his selection or his management ticket with Wexford a couple of years ago also. Conor Heaney saying, what protocols could be put in place to prevent it though? Well, if you're officially part of a team's group that you can't referee in that championship. I mean, I think it would be fine that if you were officiating in a club football championship, maybe something like that. If you were a management team with, let's say you're the management or you're part of the Burr team and you don't play football, maybe it's okay that you would be involved in the football championship. I know, I'm just throwing that out there on the top of the...
Yeah, no, I know. There probably is, that sort of a protocol would be an easy enough one to put in place. As I said, the only thing is needs do must probably at certain times, and you just need someone to fill the gap.
Yeah. Okay, so also 6 Mile Bridge. Well, actually, we'll give the quarter-final draw in Clare now. Aina Kilnamona are going to be against Cuala, 6 Mile Bridge against Éire Óg, Ballier against Kilmaley, and Newmarket and Fergus against Wolftones. Interestingly, a situation with Éire Óg. So the draw was made before the weekend's games because I think fixtures and TG Carr getting TV stuff. They did the draw before the final group of games. And turns out that Éire Óg, their manager, Matty Shannon, I think he's been brought up for like a 12-week ban for pitch incursion from a Clooney game, which happened 4 weeks ago. So I think it was like 12 hours after they were drawn to play the match against 6 Mile Bridge. Then 4 weeks later, out of the blue, this kind of this supposed ban is coming in now. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there up against 6 Mile Bridge, whether that manager will be available or not. So just a couple of more comments here. Let's see. Bridge Clear favourites in Clare. Sean O'Sullivan, don't see why there needs to be a rule. Ref could agree with both teams on a day of the match and declare it openly. Most teams would be okay with that. Maybe that is the case. But then it can be sometimes awkward. If you're an opposing team and you're saying we don't want that umpire there, you might just be bringing a little bit of heat on you too.
Yeah, no, you could. Yeah, like it's just, and then you could just potentially be planting a seed in the referee's head or the official's head to give a call against you if it's 50-50 by just saying we're not happy with X, Y, and Z. You know, like that has happened in the run up to games where clubs would maybe state to the county board, we don't want X, Y, or Z refereeing the game. And X, Y, or Z might be refereeing the game, but they could be doing line, or they could be doing fourth official, or they could be doing umpire. And there could be a potential for a bias against you as a result of that. Like, that's human nature. People don't forget. You know, people hold grudges. That's just human nature.
Yeah. By the way, that Aina Kilnamona Whitegate game finished 22 points apiece. Kilmaley, they drew with Clonlara. I think that was a winner takes all. And actually, the draw was enough for Kilmaley to get through. And unfortunate for Clonlara, they're gone out there. As I said, Niall Deasy scored a free injury time against Cratloe to get a draw there. I think there was a few draws around the place.
Yeah, Ballier were missing Jack Brown, and I think Tony Kelly was missing as well. So that shows probably their strength in depth to get a draw with a side like Cratloe, probably missing their two most influential players, you'd nearly say, maybe outside of Niall Deasy. Yeah,
you could certainly argue that. Lads, what about Mick Mackey, umpire and charity, the Christy Ring in that famous picture?
Fair point. That's a really fair point.
That's such an edge case. I mean, that's not happening all the time here, is it?
No, but it's just mad to say, like, to an absolute legend of the game, referee or umpiring in a game where another legend who he obviously despised on the field, like there's no, like he did, like they would have despised each other when they played against each other. And if there had been a rule in place, we would be denied one of the great GA photos of all time, is that?
Yeah. Okay, we'll jump on to Waterford now because Ballygunner completed 8 in a row. It was pretty pedestrian stuff, really, that once they got a goal early on through Desi Hutchinson, you knew it was pretty much game over from then on. Finished Ballygunner 227, Rowan Moore 13 points. So Desi Hutchinson with 1-9 from play. Let me know if you can think of any better county final performances than that. That was great stuff. Unfortunate for Rowan Moore, they're back there the first time in 31 years. Didn't work out for them. Also highly notable that Pádraig Mahoney scored 9 points, 7 of those coming from frees. And, you know, there's a bit of dominance going on there, obviously, with Ballygunner. And we've seen that in other counties too. Obviously, Cuala have won 5 and 6. Corofin, they're obviously mopping up the titles and won 3 in a row, All-Irelands. I think Thurles Farsfield is very much taken over in Tipperary there for long spells, although they haven't won it in the last few years. Pure Hatchet says here, Waterford Senior Championship equals Farmer Championship. Are Ballygunners favoured for Munster? But just to jump back to the topic of dominance, Darragh Sullivan, who's over Ballygunner, was asked about this, and he says, you know, if it's bad, this dominance, and he goes, it's up to the other clubs to get back and push that standard, to look at juvenile setups, get their structures right and push from there. It's not about lazy analysis. People saying it's good for Waterford hurling if Ballygunner are beaten. I honestly think Waterford are closer to winning All-Ireland Senior Championship now than they ever were in my time or in the last 60 years or whatever it is. And we're doing what we're doing, pushing the standards. The lazy analysts who say it's not good for Waterford hurling, I don't believe that. If you look at Munster, we've won 1 Munster title in the last 8 years. If we were winning Munster title after Munster title, you might say, what's going on here? But while we're challenging in Munster, absolutely. If we weren't challenging there or winning titles in Waterford, then where would the other teams be? What good would that be for Waterford hurling if they couldn't challenge in Munster? I think we have 4 or 5 teams in Waterford who could really challenge at Munster club level, and that's where I think the analysis should be, rather than it's not good for Waterford if Ballygunner win 8 in a row. That's short-sighted, in my opinion. Do you agree with him?
We would have always had it said when Borough were dominating that, you know, it would be good if Borough were beaten or whatever. I would say this, like when, you know, I think it was a five in a row Borough were going for in 2004 when Coolderry stopped them. Coolderry had to get up to that level, and they did get up to that level. And then we went on a run again and we were stopped by Tullamore in 2009. But it definitely raised the standards of other teams. Other teams realised that they had to get up to a level. And I think the championship improved an awful lot as a result of that.
Does it make other clubs give up though? Because they're like, we're gone so far away now. Like I look at some teams in Dublin getting beaten by 40 points there. And we've talked about this. There's an awful lot of that in the last 3 or 4 years. And I wonder, do clubs or players within sort of half throw their hat
But potentially, but I think that's more so if you're, ranked 8, 9, 10 in that county. Like, has Cuala's success forced a team like Nafina to really buck up? I would say it probably has. Has it forced Crokes to look at themselves a bit closer? Has it forced Bowden, who were the kingpins before that, to buck up a bit more? I would say it probably has. You don't want a team totally dominating, but it can definitely raise the standards within that championship and force teams to, I don't know, get organised a bit better, get a better setup in place, find those little inches that the best teams have. So it's kind of a funny one. Like I don't personally agree with Dara that there's 4 or 5 teams in Waterford that could compete in Munster. I don't see that. There's only one team that could compete in Munster. There's no other team at the moment. Like, you couldn't say, like, I know they were well beaten in the final and they had a good run to the final, but you couldn't say Rowan Moore are going to compete in Munster, because I just don't. They haven't won a county title or been around there since around 1990. You wouldn't say the same about Passage. De La Salle have obviously been there before, but they were in a relegation semi-final at the weekend. So I think that is pie in the sky. But I do think the fact that a team is setting unbelievable standards, and even you showed the the squad and the backroom team that's associated with them, that is probably forcing clubs to go to another level. Now, that's a dangerous thing as well, in the sense of, the winners do write the script. So if, a lot of clubs will be thinking, if we need to get up to their level, we need to have, 2 S&Cs, we need to have 2 video men, we need to have 2 stats people. And that's a dangerous thing. You could have 15 or 20 in every backroom team, but it definitely does force probably clubs to look a little deeper. This Ballygunner success, fair enough, it's at senior level now, but it's a direct result of people putting 10 or 15 years in at underage level, and that's just the way it is. And I think that's what clubs need to do. They need to really put their resources back into underage setups and be catering for the future.
Yeah, Rowan Moore obviously put huge effort in the last few years to turn things around, but there's no parish rule within Waterford City. So they're kind of fighting the likes of Ballygunner, and I'm trying to remember, is it Mount Sion that are the other side of them? Someone will clarify there. So imagine, like, these big, massive, established clubs with all the glitzy players and all that success, and they're trying to compete for the same hearts and minds. And you have players like Gavin O'Brien who's coaching underage teams. I'm sure plenty of the other players are doing the same likewise. So it's very difficult, because it's not, and I'm not saying this in any criticism of Ballygunner at all, because people would say, well, it's the same with Cuala, like, and that's fine, because I'm not criticising Cuala either. But it's very difficult for, you're not starting off at the same point, because the other team has gone so far ahead in terms of, like, their setup and their underage and all that kind of stuff. And especially if you're competing for the same players in the same area, it's very difficult, like, because a lot of players will go with Ballygunner just because of the lure of that success. I mean, that's natural. As a kid, like, you look at Ronaldo scoring and you want to be Ronaldo, or Alan Shearer in my case, and obviously I haven't been able to replicate that, but you know what I mean, like.
Yeah, De La Salle are obviously a city side in Waterford there as well, so there's another big club with a lot of tradition that's competing for the hearts and minds of players there too. So it's definitely not simple. I saw there was an interesting piece about Rowan Moore there last week, where every senior player knows every underage player's names, and they're down working in academies together, and there's a real community kind of a feel to it, despite the fact that they're obviously in kind of a large populated area where they're competing against other clubs. But, like, I'm not having a go at Rowan Moore. I'm just saying, like there's not other clubs. There are not 4 or 5 Waterford clubs that would be really, really, really competitive in Munster. There would not. Ballygunner are by far and away the strongest Waterford team, and as Dara says, they don't win Munster every year, and they've only won one in recent years.
Yeah, and look, obviously Dara's doing a great job there, so we're not taking a cut at him. I understand why a manager would say that about the other clubs in the county. No doubt you'd say that, but he's probably aware himself that isn't really the case.
Can I say something as well, Shane? The last few years, and I've been down at a couple of Waterford finals, there's definitely, I think it's really interesting, there's definitely no sense of, oh, this is another county final. They seem to, like, it's a real carnival atmosphere. I was down there when they hammered Passage last year, and they were going wild. It was the same scenes yesterday. It was the same in 2019. It was the same in 2018. So there's definitely no element of complacency from a Ballygunner side, even though we have talked about, like, their goal is beyond Waterford, but they clearly have. They're able to focus their eyes just on Waterford and not look further ahead at that moment in time, because it definitely showed how much it meant to them yesterday.
Yeah, we're going to have a club power rankings coming very soon. We'll just let a couple of other little things get sorted in the different counties before we nail our colours to the mast there. One thing's for sure, we're going to get it wildly wrong. We'll give a stab at it anyway. Sean O'Sullivan says, think Ballygunner won every grade bar one under 14A, I think, this year's crazy bit of business. Waterford need De La Salle to really challenge, otherwise it could be 20 in a row. Still feel they won't make it past the Clare champions this year. Sean also adds, gutted Socky won't come back to county. Jack Chester might be worth looking at, made a great save and impressed all championship. Even Port Tumnus says ML89, Athenry or Sarsfields never did more than 3 in a row in Galway. Hard to see how it's great for any county, to be honest. Short raise is standard, but once it gets over 5, 6, 7 in a row, it's hard turn. I mean, look at Dublin dominating in the football there with the 6 in a row. Like for a while, it did feel like almost people who aren't really massively into their Gaelic football were probably tuning out of a lot of the championship once it got to that stage of them winning so many. Maybe even the same with Kilkenny before that in the hurling.
Yeah, just an interesting one on Ballygunner's age profile. Yeah, like Stephen O'Keefe could play for another good few years, but he's 30 years old. They say Barry Coughlin is similar age. Pádraig Mahony's not exactly too far behind as well. Shane O'Sullivan, their centre back, I think that was his 11th Waterford medal yesterday. Like it's definitely fair to say he has less years remaining than he's already put in. There are a lot of guys with that upper kind of age profile. Fair enough, Desi Hutchinson, Peter Hogan, Ian Kenny and a few others are younger, but a lot of their mainstays, Philip Mahoney, who's obviously missing as well, there are a lot of older guys as well. So it's the same with the Dubs. When a lot of the big high profile names, maybe the leaders in the dressing room stepped aside, probably that's when their dominance kind of went away. So like, I don't think they're guaranteed anything, and over the next couple of years they will have a lot of their big names probably finishing up.
Yeah, how big of a blow do you think it is that Stephen O'Keefe won't be going back to Waterford next year? Or do you think, now he did say, like, that's finished for me now. In fairness, the two lads, Sean O'Brien and Billy Nolan, they're doing brilliant in there. There'll be no guarantees that I went back now that the place will be there for him. I've given a good 9 or 10 years, and I think that chapter is finished for myself. Really enjoying playing with the brothers and some of the childhood friends in Ballygunner. It's after giving me a real lease of life, so I'm enjoying it, and I'm not ready to give it up just yet. Interested, I'm not ready to give it up just yet. Oh, he's obviously talking about playing hurling. Sure, he's very young to be giving it up. And he is a brilliant goalkeeper. We've played against him in club a few times, and always impressed me. And of course, you go back to he basically changed the laws of hurling by charging down that Anthony and Ash free, because the penalties were no longer being brought in, and the frees been brought inside the 21 after he charged one down in Munster 2014. So he's certainly left a legacy.
He definitely has, yeah. I think it is a loss for Waterford. It's something that they've already overcome in many ways, in the sense of he was missing last year, so it's not going to be a big departure this year. Sean O'Brien and Billy Nolan have already had a year under the belt. Billy playing most of the league and Sean playing most of the championship, and they'll have more experience next year. But it would have been a massive boost coming back. He's only 30 years old. You could have seen him playing for Waterford until he was 35 or 36. Realistically, he's a fit man. There would have been no reason why he couldn't have played for Waterford for another 4 or 5 years if that was his wish. It would have been a big boost if he had come back. There's no point in saying any different, because he's the best Waterford keeper I can remember anyway in my lifetime. So it would have been a big boost if he had come back. But at least from Cal's point of view and Waterford's point of view, the replacements are already in place, and they've already moved forward without him.
Yeah, it's not like we're thinking disaster that he's gotten. Like, he's a really good goalkeeper, and I think ideally they'd still have him in the setup. But having watched what we watched last year, Billy Nolan playing the championship and Sean O'Brien, I don't think we're coming away thinking, God, they don't have lads that they can rely on here. I think both of those guys could potentially be relied on. Even that save Sean O'Brien made against John McGrath. I'm not saying every puck out went perfectly against Limerick. They more or less explode everyone's puck outs, let's be honest. But there'll be a certain learning curve in there next year. But they're not in too bad a shape. But sad to see him go, because he has been very good. Just look at a few more comments here. Kildare could go the same way as Waterford, with Naas beginning to build. It's not necessarily the county setup that gets affected, but the interest in the club games that suffer. That could be true too. I do feel like it's better in Tipperary now that, and I'm just picking the Tip example, I don't really have a clue who'll win the county championship this year, which is a good thing. Mount Sion, Erin's Own, Rome Moor, St. Saviour's, Ferrybank Passage, De La Salle, all within a 10-mile drive of each other. Yeah, that's true. Waterford have been the second best team for the last 2 years. They do their own thing. They're grand. Biggest problem in Waterford is Tremor. Second biggest population centre, only one club, barely making intermediate. Generations of potential players never making it, never produced a county player. Actually, I wonder, is that a problem with a lot of seaside towns, that young lads just aren't as interested in GA? And
too
young girls too.
too much going on, too many distractions. I always say that even within a town. I'm from Borough, obviously. There are many distractions in a town, and we're not by the seaside, and we don't have loads of tourists coming down to the town for 3 or 4 months of the year, and the potential for, you know, seasonal employment where you could be working from 9 to 9 during the summer, and maybe sport mightn't be a big thing as well. But just funny about people said, one viewer said about interest levels and Ballygunner's dominance taking away the interest level at club level. Like, I remember chatting to Dan Shannon last winter, and one of the main reasons he was staying on with Lismore was to try and stop Ballygunner, to try and be part of a kind of a coming Lismore side that could take down Ballygunner. And when we were having the Tom Brady conversation, he probably should have been in it, because he's 44 and still playing club, having made his debut. Did he make his debut in 92? Am I right? 92 or 93? Yeah.
Comment in here from Skills, he agrees.
Yeah. Like, it definitely should have been. It's people like that. Like, Dan is finished from Waterford, the guts of a decade now, and he's still playing club. But that's Ballygunner are driving him on to stay playing. I'm sure in a way they're driving some people to stop playing, but that's only natural. People will take that type of adversity one of two ways.
Yeah, and I just think back in '92 or whenever he was making his debut, that was probably the era of those grips, the sort of like towel-like grips that had the like strands hanging off them. Lovely when it was dry, absolute disaster when it was wet. I'm sure some of our younger viewers won't even have a clue about that. But that reminds me that Nisha Waldron did a great video on the Our Game playlist there about just gripping a hurley. And it's like 5 or 6 minutes long, and it should be unbelievably boring. But for whatever reason, it is compelling view of just watching him talk as he's gripping the hurley. So keep an eye out for that. You enjoyed that.
It's quite therapeutic, actually. And just to see the way he's actually turning the hurl around the grip, not the other way. It's quite interesting. I've no problem admitting this. I've never gripped a hurl in my life. Never, no. I just, like, as my father says, excuse the language here, half in hands to wipe me, you know, whatever. Yeah. That's what he always says, and I have no problem in saying that. I can play sport, but I wouldn't be great at, you know, changing wires or doing anything like that. And a couple of times I tried to put on grips were horrible failures. So I'm sure I'm going to get abused for this, but my mother still puts on all my grips. I've no problem in admitting that. And she actually gripped 2 for me last night, because I got 2 new hurls, and I was just kind of thinking, geez, these could be 2 of the last 2 times she ever grips a hurl. But she does a fantastic job, I have to say, as well as making my dinners and doing many other things. That's one of many other things that she does for me.
I think when Lark Orbit was doing that, I can't remember what it was called, but some documentary a while back, his mother used to do all his gear and put them in these little cubby holes, these little pigeon holes. And it was
his Lake Regale, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a system that worked for her and worked for him. So you had the same sort of setup with your mother.
Something like that, yeah. Don't change it. If it's not broken, don't change it.
Yeah, and how do you talk her into that? You almost make her feel like she's part of the team if she does this for you.
Yeah, you kind of a bit of motivation, you know. Just, I need you for this one. I need you here.
Need you at 100%. Niall Heffernan says, back to work, can't DOS anymore, lads. You should do a Saturday afternoon special. Never know. White tape with a white grip. That's only fancy stuff, says Skills there.
I think a white grip is too fancy anyway, to be honest with you. I've been using this kind of bluey grip that has this kind of weird paint effect going through it, and all my hurls are of that colour now. And I've noticed a lot of lads in the club are the same. Say Paul Cleary, that used to hurl Offaly, he's always uses black. Shawnee Ryan, he always uses green. There's generally, Nisha said he uses 3 different colours. I find older lads now in particular usually stick with one. I don't know if it's that they just refuse to change at this stage of their career, but a lot of lads do tend to stick to the same colour.
Yeah, I would go with any colour. I couldn't care less. Could not care less. I've gone out with pink grips, intentionally gone out with pink grips, the bit of flash, the bit of flair. Maybe look for a small bit of contact with it. So surely there's the odd lad who want to hit you just for having that. An orange grip with a white bit of tape doesn't look so bad, I have to say.
Orange grip, white tape. Yeah, that looks all right. I'm standard. I'm very standard.
You're a boring man, to be fair.
Black boots, Adidas World Cup, Puma King, standard colour grip, black tape. Bob's your uncle.
And when you're asked what's your favourite movie, Shawshank Redemption, just like every GA player.
Wayne's World.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Joe, I'm going to bring up something here. This was an issue that it's an issue that we've been seeing for a long time in the GA when it relates to togging out. So obviously you can now have 6 people in a dressing room. But if you look at the situation, Kieran Lillis and Colin Parkinson were talking about it the weekend. Portlaoise togging out under a gutter in the Lashna rain for a championship knockout game at 7 p.m. Stand being used by teams in 5 p.m. said Colin. And Kieran Lillis says, at least we had the gutter. St. Joseph's had nothing. Complete madness. Laois GA are just implementing the rules. But inter-county teams were allowed to tog out in the dressing rooms for league and championship. What's the difference? Open the dressing rooms to club teams. And look, I mean, it's a little bit ludicrous, isn't it?
Yeah, the big question I have to ask is how many people are on the squads for the 5 o'clock game? Or Moore Park is a monster of a stand. Are you telling me that one team couldn't be in one corner, another down the other corner, and then the 2 in the middle? Absolutely, there's no reason why not. So I'm not sure what exactly the scenario was there, but it makes no sense at this stage why teams can't be in dressing rooms. It makes absolutely no sense.
Look, vaccinations levels are through the roof, and then you're like, I've said this already, I go down to a local gym and there could be 40 or 50 people in the thing. Now, there are obviously big, wide open areas, but, I mean, there are wide open areas like in that stand there, for example. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, Shane, so those guys weren't let congregate in a dressing room yesterday, but yet, more than likely, if they're the same as most clubs in the country, they congregated in a pub afterwards to have a few pints and talk about the match. So, it's just, there's no common sense in that.
Yeah, look, we want to look morally superior at all times. That's one of the big things in Ireland. But anyway, we'll jump on from that because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because not everyone likes going down that rabbit hole. The Tipperary backroom team was announced the other day. And look, I mean, sometimes you hear rumours and sometimes you get the story early and all this. I had seen, or I'd heard that Johnny Enright and Tommy Dunn were going to be named as part of the backroom team as early as last Tuesday, but I just didn't get a second source to confirm it. But that has now been confirmed. Johnny Enright, he's been with Meath in the past year, and I've heard good reports about him there. Tommy Dunn has obviously been involved with Liam Sheedy for the past 3 years, winning an All-Ireland and obviously coming up short in the other seasons. And then he was previously involved with Declan Ryan, won Munster in 2011, but worst defeat of all, the Tipperary have ever had in championship then in 2012. That was under Declan Ryan. Paul Curran has also been added to the team as well. What's your initial thoughts? And then you can grill me on what I think.
I tell you what, I don't know Tommy Dunn personally, but there's clearly very little ego with him. If he's willing to, he just wants to be involved in Tipperary hurling. He's been involved in 3 different setups now, 3 different managers, and he'd been involved up in Dublin briefly as well. So, anything I've heard about Tommy has been good. So there's a nice bit of continuity there. Having continuity with a coach is different than with maybe managers or whatever. A coach is usually well liked. A coach gets on with players. A coach doesn't usually fall out with players. A coach is the one who can go and put an arm around someone and can almost play the good cop to the manager's bad cop at times. So plus, the Tommy Dunn obviously knows how they've played over the last 3 years, knows what they've been doing in training. So I'd imagine trainings will change and focus of trainings will change, but there will still be a level of continuity there. Paul Curran would have a fairly modern touch, as in he's not, that far removed from inter-county hurling. And Johnny Enright has seen what Meath are doing at Joe McDonagh level and has seen a lot of other teams there. So, yeah, from an outsider looking in, I'd say there's a lot of boxes ticked. Is from a supporter's point of view and a tip person's point of view, is it? I'll give you the same question I gave to you when Bonner was named as manager. Does that backroom team enthuse you?
I mean, I think there's a nice blend of Johnny Enright obviously been involved with Thurles for so long. He was involved with Kildare, living up in Kildare there for the last 8 years. He's kind of cut his teeth then being involved with Meath at inter-county level, and they did pretty okay. So I think in terms of finding someone bringing in new ideas, that could be very good. But is he kind of proven at this level? Not entirely sure just yet. But that's not to dismiss, but that is to kind of point that out. Paul Curran, he's been involved with. We played O'Loughlin Gales in a challenge match a couple of years ago down in Kilkenny. And I didn't know at the time, but then he just happened to be there with them. So he was involved with them. So he has a bit of experience there. And I think it's no harm being involved in that Kilkenny championship. and getting some experience in there with a club like O'Loughlin. So I think that's a positive in terms of experience. He's also still playing with Mullinahone. They're in the quarterfinal of the county championship, as we said. So he's obviously very familiar with an awful lot of the forwards in Tipperary and the backs, obviously, too. Basically, he's very familiar with the club championship. Then Tommy Dunn, obviously covering the north side of the county, and we know that Colin Bonner will cover the south himself. So Tommy Dunn has been there. Now, he's been there for success in terms of winning the All-Ireland and winning Munsters, but you can't ignore that some of the biggest defeats that Tipperary have ever had in the championship have come, you know, in setups that he's been involved in. So 2012, that loss to and I'm not put it all at the feet of Tommy Dunn, but you can't ignore the fact that he was involved with that team, a team that played very little other than long ball. So that was Declan Ryan's. He was over the team. So it's the manager who decides how you play, but obviously the coach has a contribution in there too. Then Tipperary, you talked about like Liam Sheedy discussing how he setting the team up and the double centre forwards and that kind of stuff when he talked about this year. But it was a 16-point turnaround, and how did they change the game mid-flow? Didn't really find a way to do that. 2019 got an absolute pasting by Limerick. 2020, obviously well behind Limerick also. And a lot of, I'm not saying all long ball, but there's plenty of long ball in there. Now, there's a series of coaches in there with Liam Sheedy. And I don't know in the pecking order, is it Eamon O'Shea, then Dara Egan, then Tommy Dunn and Owen Kelly, or is it Tommy Dunn and then Eamon O'Shea, or you know what way it is. So I don't entirely know. But the thing is, like, I just don't know if straight away next year, does this combination of people mean that Tipperary are going to play the sort of hurling that will allow them to beat Limerick? Because, I mean, we'll talk about, you know, there'll be patience and all that sort of stuff, but patience is going to run out as soon as the Munster Championship starts next year. So I think it's not like you're saying, well, we've seen all the most modern hurling preparation or tactics or whatever. I still don't know what Tipperary's kind of game plan is going to be next year. And I don't, like, if you heard that Paul Kinnerk was going to get involved with Tipperary tomorrow, you'd have a fair idea what sort of
like that.
When you know what sort of stuff they're going to play. I'm not entirely sure what way Tipperary will play. And there's part of me that's thinking, is it going to be back to long ball, just drive? The 2 goals against Limerick this year in the first half of the championship, were they cutting Limerick apart really, or were they long balls that happened to break and lads were clever enough on instinct to make sure they followed the ball, got the break and slashed it into the net? That's what happened. They didn't cut. I mean, created very few scoring chances in that second half, have been a mile off Limerick in the last couple of years. And, you know, I mean, Tommy Dunn could end up being absolutely brilliant as part of a Colin Bonner backroom team, but a lot remains to be seen. And that's why I think, you know, I wouldn't be jumping out of my skin just yet, but I wouldn't be dismissing it either. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's
great service from Tommy Dunn. I mean, absolutely, I wouldn't question, involved with different age groups too. So incredible service, as Mark Corcoran is saying here. But like, that wasn't the question you asked. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I asked you if you were enthused. It's going to be interesting to see, you know, are some of the elder statesmen enthused? Are they enthused enough to go again? And we'll probably only find out about Paddy Maher's future when Thurles are knocked out of a championship, or whether if they go on a run or whatever. Same with Jamie Callanan, or the same with Noel McGrath and a couple of others. So it's going to be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see, has Bonner had conversations with these guys as well in the past few weeks about maybe what they're going to need to do over the next couple of months before they go back, or if they're going back at all. Or so that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out probably between now and Christmas.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, we are brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you will get 15% off their great gear, whether it's your Laois jersey there, whether it is Mayo top, or also the big reveal, this Dublin Bloody Sunday jersey, which I have to say is absolutely class.
To be honest with you, Shane, that is something you'd wear out on a Saturday night. I'd wear I think it's
open on the 22nd of October, and I'm thinking this could be the job for it.
I actually think, like, even around the neck as well, it's quite modern, even though it's 100 years old.
It's not bad at all. Not bad at all. So go to orgaretro.com, use the promo code OurGame, 15% off. If you want the audio podcast, go to patreon.com and please do support us there, $5 a month. And then also, obviously, please do subscribe to the channel. Bottom right-hand corner of the screen on YouTube It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Only about half the people who watch the show subscribe, so we could get it well over that 10,000 quickly if people would subscribe, and I'd love that. Joe Butler, Shane, that's the longest answer to a simple question that we have heard today. But doesn't that kind of say it all? It does kind of say it all. That I think these guys, they're very quality guys, but have we confirmation yet that Tipperary will be playing the sort of hurling that's required to beat Limerick next year? It can't be the exact same system as Limerick, of course not, because Tipperary have different players to Limerick. But can they play something progressive? We haven't seen proof yet. So that's why there has to be, until it's proven, you have to, you're not going to be entirely sold on it just yet. Do you know there was a county final that was decided by penalties yesterday? This was in Roscommon. Not everyone is always looking to talk
semi-final.
Did I not say semi-final?
No, final.
Okay. Well, look, Michael misheard me there. I said semi-final. But at league, they dethroned Pádraig Pearse's. It finished 2-12 to 18 points after extra time. Niall Connolly proved to be at league's hero. His penalty gave him a 2-1 victory. And then goalkeeper David Connell, he's saved from Liam Feely. And then let's see who else. They're going to be against Tremaine, who are in their first final since 1996. But I think it's the first county final between these two since for 41 years. And I think both of their players play club together for who do they play club together in football with? With Ferty, Fuerty. I'm not sure if too many people outside the county have heard of them. And Niall Kilroy used to play football for Roscommon. He scored 6 points for Tremaine as well. They had a huge win over 4 roads. So how would you feel about winning a county semi-final on penalties or losing it? Because you'd be happy enough to win.
You'd be sick if you lost it. And the thing is, it's not a real defeat, which might be good in a way that it might make the winter easier. But I don't know. It'd be an awful way to go out. It really would. I just think there's an awful lot of blame on whoever missed the penalty, and there's an awful lot of acclaim for whoever saved the penalty. If I won, I'd have no complaints. If I lost, there'd be good and bad to it. We could say we were this close, and sure, it was only penalties, and sure, that doesn't count, and sure, it was a draw match, and this kind of thing. But it would be a sick way to lose.
Goal and score be better?
Yeah, because somebody wins. You know what I mean? You're winning by a point on the scoreboard, not on penalties.
Yeah. Okay. So we're speaking about two teams from the same parish there, because Tremaine and Atleague are both playing with Ferty, or the same town. Interesting then in Killarney that Dr. Crokes will be coming up against Legion, and one of them will be going down to intermediate after. That is interesting. I wonder, have there been many situations where that's happened, where there's in the same town two teams playing off for relegation?
Janie Mac, in the same town, I wouldn't say it happens too often. And you'd
imagine someone surely knows out there.
Yeah, you'd imagine within a town, town teams are generally, they have good numbers, or should have good numbers, because they've plenty to pick from. But Dr. Crokes having won the All-Ireland Club football title in 2017, how quickly things can change. And it might just be a sequence of results. Did Shawnee O'Shea kick 15 points somewhere, did I see? Did that play a big part in it? Legion won a county title only a couple of years ago as well, didn't they? So you're going to have a big gun going down the ranks. I think Gooch is involved in the Crokes backroom team. I could be wrong, but I think I saw that at some stage. So if Legion went down, it would be a big story. If Crokes went down, it would be a huge story. And I'd say the crack in Killarney and the build up to that would be huge. And we've talked about them meeting in a county final. That's great crack. It's people in a county final, and it's anticipation, and it's slagging and all that. In a relegation final, that's just people walking around on eggshells all week. Just people walking around so afraid that they're going to be part of the management team or part of the playing squad that go down to, whatever, the second, whatever. I don't know if it's intermediate or if it's senior B in Kerry, but particularly for Crokes to go down to intermediate would be a huge story. And
4 years after winning the Club All-Ireland.
That squad will not want that. That would probably be shades of maybe Portumna, who won the All-Ireland Club title in 2014, I think, and then were obviously relegated to senior B last year. Maybe someone like St. Joseph's, Dora Bearfield in Clare, and a couple of others. And I'm sure that's a game for television, because you're guaranteed drama in that. I can't see the nature of a relegation match. They're rarely big high scoring affairs with huge like margins between them. Probably outside of that De La Salle Ballysagger game last weekend, they're pressure filled environments where some nerveless free taker has to put over something at the end to try and keep his team up or something like that. Shane, I'd like to apologise. I very nearly veered into bad language there when I was talking about the relegation thing, just because it's a topic that is very how should we say, emotive.
Kiltormer won the Senior All-Ireland and got relegated in the same year, according to ML89. Hey, look at this. Skills, hard to beat Verney's enthusiasm. He's up there with Tommy.
Yeah,
the only time you'll be compared to him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, while we're talking about Kerry, what did you make of Peter Keane's statement the other day? Now, people will know that he was Kerry manager for the last 3 years. They didn't win the All-Ireland. Obviously, they won the Munster title, which isn't exactly, I don't know, breaking new ground for Kerry, we'll say. But he came out with a statement because Jack O'Connor was installed as manager and said, Unfortunately, losing the semi-final by 1 point in extra time to the eventual All-Ireland winners led to a decision to end the work we had started and the momentum we had built. I know the players very much wanted us to continue with our project. They were the reason I wanted to stay. We were a united Kerry team with a great sense of purpose and ambition. All the players communicated to the county board subcommittee their strong preference for the present management to be retained. It's most disappointing that their wishes do not appear to have been considered in the decision-making process. I find this very unusual to come out with a statement like this because what's to be achieved? Now, I like that he's talking, and I mean, too often when you talk to Peter Keane in the media the last few years, interview him after a match, he's telling you up is down, left is right. We beat Tyrone by 6 goals, but it could have just as easily gone the other way. You know, and a lot of Yera talk and, you know, stuff like that. And he does talk now, so I'm glad he's given a bit more of a straightforward opinion on this occasion. But the horse is long bolted, so what's the point?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Shane. I think the Kerry County Board have definitely not covered themselves in glory here. First things first, they basically said that the job was essentially up for tender without mentioning Peter Keane's 3 years or without thanking him for anything or anything like that. So the writing was on the wall for Peter Keane at that stage when he basically had to reapply for his, you know, what was his own job. We saw the same with Mickey Hart. He reapplied essentially for his own job and wasn't going to get the job. I don't understand why the Kerry executive had clearly made a decision, and that was that Peter Keane wasn't going to be manager for 2022. I don't understand why that wasn't conveyed to him. And if that had been conveyed to him, I'm sure he probably would have stepped aside from the race. And Kerry would have thanked him for what he's done over the last 3 years, regardless of whether they won. Like, they still won 2 Munster titles. It's not as if they won nothing, and they won the league last year as well, didn't they? Just, I think, far too often in the GA, we're looking just to the next thing, the next manager, and we forget about the service that Peter Keane has given at senior, minor level, development squad level, and we just cast people aside. Like, I put it to you this way: will Peter Keane be involved with Kerry at any age group in the future after how he was treated here?
Well, you probably would have said that about Donal Maloney and Jerry O'Connor, and yet Donal Maloney, is it Donal Maloney who is involved with player underage now? So, and then, yeah.
But I don't understand.
It's a fair point, though. It is a fair point.
I don't understand why we have to, why do we have to kick somebody going out the door? And like, why didn't Kerry just come out once Jack O'Connor was announced, come out and say, thanks, a nice statement towards Peter Keane, the 3 years he gave, All-Ireland winning minor manager, 2-time Munster winning manager. Fair enough, they didn't get where they wanted to get, but thank him for all his service to Kerry GA, and we look forward to whatever. We look forward to having you on board again in the coming years. Similar thing happened with Pat O'Shea, to the best of my recollection. When he stepped away from Kerry, there was a lot of rancour around that as well, and I believe there were grievances with the Kerry board, and could still be grievances with the Kerry board with how he was treated. I just don't understand. And same with players. It's almost like everybody is disposable, and we never think of, we never just think of the service that they've given, players or management or whatever. Like, they've given an awful lot of time. I just think this has been horribly dealt with from start to finish. I don't know if Peter Keane coming out with a statement is the right thing, but at least he's getting his side across, and rather than the narrative going in whatever direction, he's saying this. Now, did all the players convey that they wanted the management to stay on for 2022? I find that hard to believe.
Well,
Like that,
what I would take that as being, number one, I do think it's been horribly dealt with by Kerry County Board, and we've kind of said that in the last few weeks. So I just wanted to underline that once again. When you hear that, the statement is very clear, all the players communicated it to the county board. Now, I don't know if all the players did, but what probably happened is there was probably a vote, and then come back to the management. Do you want us to stay on or not? I'm sure that sort of conversation happened between management and players. They came back and said, yeah, we want us to stay, but that probably would have been a vote. So you don't know if that was like 51%, 49, and then you're there deciding, okay, that means the players want me to stay. So therefore, you're, as manager, saying to the county board, well, look, all the players want me to stay because the vote carried. So we don't have that information. But I think in terms of his own catharsis, it might be great to get that off your chest and get it out there in the public that everyone wanted me to stay. But like, those players are now going to be in a dressing room with Jack O'Connor. As Trumpspieler says here, the breakups are never easy, and Mark Corcoran adds it puts the pressure on Jack O'Connor. Patrick Hickey said he's saving face. But like, those players are going to be in the dressing room with Jack O'Connor next year. I mean, once you're out of the dressing room, people quickly forget about you and move on to the next guy. I mean, especially if you haven't actually won the All-Ireland, which Kerry's players, like all year, I thought Kerry were not going to win an All-Ireland for the reasons that they didn't. They just didn't quite have the mettle when it came down to it. Really fine margins, but I wouldn't have seen them winning an All-Ireland final if they had to get through against Tyrone. But like, it just, the horse has bolted. I mean, if you had to put out that statement publicly before Jack O'Connor was interviewed, like Jack O'Connor went onto a podcast and talked about the allure of the job. Then he steps down as Kildare manager. He made very, very public moves that he basically wanted the job. That was the time for Peter Keane to make his statement, because it might have actually impacted what happened thereafter.
Yeah, can I just say something as well? Martin Verney had a brief little sidebar to his Verney beat column last Tuesday, where he said, basically, why did Stephen Stack and his team bother running, for the Kerry job? And I think it's a fair point, but I also think them running, and I'm sure this was not their motive, them running and assembling a star-studded team of Stephen Stack, Donny Buckley, Darragh Kanaja, Seamus Moynihan, and a couple of others kind of almost highlights how Kerry had already made their decision. And it didn't matter, whether, Paul Kinnerk was going to be a coach with the next Kerry football team, or it didn't matter who was going to be. That decision was already made. So I actually think it was a good thing that someone else was in the mix, because maybe it highlights further. I'd say that maybe it wasn't the best ran kind of managerial process that there has been in recent years.
Yeah.
It looked like it was signed, sealed and delivered before the process even started, basically, once Jack O'Connor made overtures. And the pressure is on him. I do think it's really interesting who the first Kerry player is to do an interview with a paper or a podcast of any kind. So they're going to be asked about Peter Keane. Did the players back Peter Keane? And then they're going to have to say, so did you back the previous manager to be manager now? And do you back the current manager? Like, it's a bit of a thankless situation.
Yeah, and I do feel sorry for Peter Keane in this situation, because I don't think he was treated particularly well. Like, that's just underlining that once more. But
I do think it's hilarious as well, though, Shane, that Peter Keane, who wouldn't say anything to the media over the past 3 years, and I was down in Current for his first interview, where he talked less in riddles than he did over the subsequent 3 years. He's given the media very little in the last 3 years, and then that statement was circulated through the media, basically through media contacts the other day, which I do think that was dripping in irony as well, considering how the last 3 years have played out.
Yeah, Trumpspieler says, even Mick O'Dwyer left in acrimony. He wanted to stay on and wasn't let. Paddy was absolutely shabbily treated too. History of this in Kerry. Poor old Ogie treated poorly also. ML89, Keane should have known the minute the board said it was going to interviews for the manager's job that he wasn't the guy they wanted at all. Board went a very long-winded way of getting rid of him. Ned O'Sullivan is another one who's been added to that too. By the way, we're going to announce the winner of the competition from the Benetti Menswear series of shows, the All-Ireland series live. You can still go back and watch them if you like. like, it was to win an OrgaRetro.com jersey. So we're going to announce that before the end of the show. And we'll be giving out a code for somebody to go ahead and get that jersey.
Is this going to be like that raffle that I saw last week where the sponsor ended up winning the raffle? Can I just say that's a disastrous scenario. That's the last thing that club would have wanted. And funnily enough, it's the last thing the sponsor would have wanted. But he wanted to, and I've seen it, like I play the Burr Lotto every week. I don't want to win it because I organise our online lotto. And I'm heavily involved in the club. I wouldn't be worth the hardship. It's 7,200. If anyone wants to play, just go to Burr GA Smart Lotto. But I do not want to win it. It would not be worth the hardship. And my father actually won it about 2 or 3 months ago, and it just wasn't worth it for the abuse I got and even the abuse he got. So that club, I forget what club it was, that's the last thing that they would have wanted to happen.
No doubt about it. So right, the Kilkenny Championship over the weekend, there's plenty of moving and shaking going on there. We know the situation now with the quarterfinals. It's going to be James Stephens against Dixborough, Bennett's Bridge against Ballyhale Shamrocks. They obviously had a goal-riddled affair earlier in the group stages. Clara against Tullaroan and O'Loughlin Gales against Mulnavat. You're going to have Castlecomer against Ballycallan and Great Ballycallan in the relegation, along with the Rower against Lisdowney. So just to quickly run through some of the games here. League final, it doesn't, it's all well and good. You won a league final in Kilkenny, but nobody's really going to remember it. But Bennett's Bridge have that under their belts anyway after beating Clara.
Yeah, beat them 19 points to 16 at the weekend. Really, at this stage, with the league final and the Shield final, you just want to get through. It's a glorified challenge game. You just want to get through without any injuries. And in fairness, Clara didn't get through without an injury. Lester Ryan pulled up after about 5 minutes. I think he went off after 8 minutes with a hamstring injury. So he's a doubt for their game against Tullaroan in the quarterfinal this weekend, which would be a big blow. Bennett's Bridge were without Rob Lennon, Kieran Brennan and Sean Morrissey. I think there was a gale force breeze blowing down the pitch in the first half. Bennett's Bridge played with it and played poorly enough, I believe. Chris Bulger was very good for Clara in the first half. I think the Bridge were a point up at half time, even though it was a 6-point win, but they really knuckled down in the second half to win by 3. Liam Blanchfield scored 4 from play, and I think it was Willie Murphy got 5 from play as well. So they're league champions, and the reward for winning the league is to come up against essentially the reigning All Ireland club champions who are going for 3 in a row, even if there'll be a gap here in between. So I don't know if that's much of a reward for them. In the Shield final, then the Village beat Mulnavat 221 to 115. The Village got off to a real strong start and kind of had them at arm's length throughout. As one of our viewers said earlier there, Willie O'Dwyer is still going strong for Mulnavat. Conor Brown is still not back for the Village.
That's huge.
I think it was a double. There was 2 tears in his hamstring and he went off against Dublin. And it's probably only natural enough that there's been little problems here and there ever since, and he's been picking up little knocks, but he hasn't featured since. And he would probably be playing midfield, centre forward. Even centre forward is probably the most likely place from what I believe he would be playing. So they'd love to have him back. Probably not going to have him back this weekend though. Just some of the other preliminary quarterfinals. So if you won, you were through to the quarterfinal. If you lost, you were in the relegation semi-final. Dixborough were far from impressive against Lisdowney. They beat them 119 to 215. They got off to a good start. Bill Sheehan got 1-2, and I think it was Andy Gaffney got 5 points from play. But they're not motoring particularly well under Pádraig Fanning, and I think Tony Brown is with them at the moment. They're missing Ollie Walsh, who'd be one of their better players.
Colin Bonner was their coach, but obviously he departed when he got the tip job.
Yeah, not sure if Ollie Walsh is going to be back for the tie against the Village, which is also like a big city derby. They're right on top of each other there. That'll be an interesting game, but the Borough aren't going particularly well at the moment.
Lisdowney had a chance to equalise at the end, didn't they?
They did, yeah, and they could have beaten the Village. They could have beaten Dixborough. At least they're going into that relegation semi-final. I know they haven't won, but they've showed that they're good enough to be up senior. And it's just a matter of producing a result and getting over the line and saving their senior status. It's funny, and you've seen with teams in recent years, if they can just save their senior status this year, in the first year up, they could stay up for a couple of years. But if they go back down, they could find it very hard to get back up, particularly straight away. We talked about Dixborough not playing particularly well. Ballyhale are starting to motor anyway, and even they got over Ballycallan. I think it was 6 points in the end. but they're still missing the Mullins. I think Darren and Paddy came on. Adrian is still out with a broken hand. You'd imagine Darren and Paddy would probably start next week against Bennett's Bridge, and they're going to have a point to prove, obviously, against the Bridge, having been beaten by them early on. I think Ballycallan played some of their best stuff in a long, long time. Billy Ryan was very good, I believe, and they're going in, as I said, they're going into that relegation semi-final playing fairly decent stuff as well. Having been beaten 6 points by Ballyhale is no shame, and there was only a score in it going down the stretch.
Yeah, Sean Ryan scored 1-9, 6 of those are from place ball, so that's 1-3 from play. Same with Billy Ryan, he got 1-3. Shane Butler, he scored 3 points. Colin Fennelly, I mean, he's still such a nightmare to mark. Has to be for any full-back out there. He scored 2-1. Joe Cudahy now with 1-5. That's a name that we've seen when we've been covering their games the last few years, and he's obviously stepping up more and more. TJ Reid scored 3 from play. Brian Cody and Owen Cody, they scored 4 each. Evan Shefflin scored 3. Richie Reid scored a point. You see, as all those players come back into the team, and you start naming out the players who scored, or basically who are named in the team, you're not even naming the likes of Joey Holden. Then Dean Mason is obviously a very good goalkeeper as well. There's an awful lot of familiar names. So as they kind of go up through the gears now in the championship, we're in the quarterfinal stage. They're up against Bennett's Bridge. Even though Bennett's Bridge beat them when there was 8 goals in the final quarter in the group game earlier on in the year, I think you have to make the Shamrocks favourites there for both the county championship and for that game.
Yeah, they look like they're coming to the boil again just at the right time. This is a big test at the quarterfinal stage. But they've overcome these sort of challenges before, and you would expect them to overcome them again. In some of the other games, Tullaroan beat Castlecomer, which probably would have been a surprise, but Pádraig Walsh is supposed to have been absolutely superb throughout. I believe Martin Walsh and even Tommy was very good, and Massey Keown was brilliant for them as well. And they'll fancy their chances against Clara at the weekend, particularly if Lester Ryan is out. And at this stage of the day, if you pick up a hamstring injury a week out from a quarter final, you're going to be under pressure. So if he was out, Clara would be missing their centre back. That would be a huge loss. Just on Castlecomer, they were semi-finalists a couple of years ago. They've been regular quarter finalists. They wouldn't have been seen as been down in the bottom 4 anyway. I believe Conor Fogarty was good for them at the weekend, but Conor Delaney and Kieran Wallace, 2 other kind of county panelists, were kind of quiet enough. I think it was the only other group game or the only other preliminary quarter final. Loughlin's beat the Roar fairly well. Paddy Deegan was very good. I believe he was full forward and corner forward, which would be a fairly large departure from where he's playing with Kilkenny, playing corner.
Well, see, that's always my thing when I see O'Loughlin's play, and Martin Comerford is obviously over 40 at this stage, so I don't think he's playing there the last season or so. They had a lot of forwards who are very skillful, fast, and maybe some are of a smaller size profile. So maybe they just felt they needed his bulk up there. He's a physically strong player. He mightn't be the biggest player on the pitch when you look at an inter-county game, but by God, when you see him at club level, he's a tank. Yeah,
at club level, it's different. You see, someone who's 6'1" could be a big, powerful weapon at club level, whereas they're just another player at county level, if you know what I mean. That's just kind of the way it is. Hugh Lawler has kind of moved back from midfield to centre back now, and I believe he was outstanding at the weekend as well. And just a word on the minor final, Dixborough completed 3 in a row to beat Tullaher Ross Burkham by a point. That would have been a big one for Tullaher to get to a minor A final, and I think it's Michael Walsh, the great Kilkenny goalie. It was the Dixborough manager. I saw him. There was a SoundCloud going around of him talking about their success yesterday. He gets around as well because I think he was involved with Passage, and he's involved as goalkeeping coach with Laois this year as well. But a man who absolutely loves it. Just quickly go down through the quarter-final pairings again. So the Village against the Borough, Bennett's Bridge and Shamrocks, Clara and Tullaroan, O'Loughlin Gales and Mullinavat. Hard enough call, the 4 of them, which is probably what you want at this stage. I'd probably be looking at the Village, Shamrocks. Probably would give Tullaroan a fair chance, particularly if Lester Ryan is out, and then probably O'Loughlin Gales, and then the relegation semi-final pairings again are Castlecomer against Greg Ballycallan and Roar Inistee against Lisdowney. So yeah, plenty. They're all being played next weekend as well. Yeah, which is great. It's a really intense championship. Just the games come so thick and fast there, and even the likes of some of those teams had last weekend off, with the likes of Bennett's Bridge and a couple of more teams. They had those games that were kind of pushed back a week because of a few bereavements there. So will there be a benefit for some of the other teams there? We'll see. Cork Championship there was a Premier Senior Hurling Colleges/Divisions playoff final. Immakilly battered Shandoon 436 to 16 points. So 13 points hammering there.
And Paul McCarthy, he said that his team, like he's managing there with Justin McCarthy, who's coach. He said that they were let down by the Shandoon board with the matches fixed within the division on Saturday and Sunday. And he goes, we're proud of the lads who put their hands up to represent the division, but we were badly let down by the board. There was a junior game this morning. We asked for it off. There was another yesterday. I'm not saying it's why we lost, but we had to play in McKillie. You need all your players. We were down 3 starters today. The lads, their heads dropped because we were missing Keane McCarthy and Ronan Harrington, who played with Passage West against Napiershig. Robbie Lynch was out injured. All we're looking for was one day to put the matches off. The board didn't even respond to us. We're throwing our hat at it now. We can't do anymore. So like that's obviously a very frustrating situation for Shandoon there. And, you know, to lose 436 to 16 points, geez, that's not going to do anyone any favours on any side.
No, definitely not. And it's amazing, though, sometimes when things are bad like that and you feel like circumstances are against you and you feel like everybody is against you, it can, as I said about something earlier, it works one of two ways. It either, you know, emboldens you to stand up and be counted, or it can totally suck the life out of you. And it definitely looks like that's what happened here. And just going through some of the McKillie who they were missing Kieran Histon, he was unavailable, Kieran Joyce, Seamus Harney are both injured, Anthony Spillane was sick, and they're still able to produce, you know, performance of that quality. So it definitely looks like they're the team to beat again.
Yeah, okay. The Dublin Championship over the weekend then. So the quarterfinals, they're looking interesting enough, and I'll just go through them. So Lucan against Crave Kieran, Nafina against St. Jude's, Kilmacud against St. Oliver Plunkett's Owen Rua, and Ballyboden against Cuala is obviously the pick of them, isn't it?
Oh, that's a cracking quarter-final game, yeah. That was last year's county final, was it? I think it was. Yeah, and obviously, as I said before, Ballyboden were on a great run there. I think they achieved 5 in a row about a decade ago, but they've got back. They were back in a Leinster Club final only about a year or two ago as well. So that's going to be an interesting game. Cuala, you were obviously at the Cuala game, and you'll probably give us a bit more on it, but they only had a very, very narrow win over Bridget's. I saw very little of this except Alan Nolan's worldly of a point from inside his own 45, but Cuala won 318 to 123 without giving any state secrets away. Like, what was what way did this go?
Yeah, well, I mean, leading into the game, for example, I saw Paul O'Brien, who's involved at the Dublin Under-20s, he was tipping St. Bridget's to win this game, which gives you an idea that if a team that has won 5 out of the 6 county titles is kind of being tipped against by somebody who obviously knows their hurling pretty well, that'll tell you that Cuala aren't exactly flying it at the moment. You know, Mark Schutte is injured, Paul Schutte is retired, Colin Cronin is in Australia. So I've kind of went through that before. Oisin Goff is injured there at the moment. So you're down a few players and you're sort of trying to rejig and find the right balance and all that kind of stuff. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. St. Bridget's are a good team, and they've presented very stiff opposition for Cuala in the past couple of seasons. The county final a couple of years ago, no doubt they were kicking themselves that they didn't manage to get over the line that day, and they will absolutely be killing themselves that they didn't win this game, because if they had to take their goal chances, they would have won the game. And like, you look at the final scoreline, 318 to 123, that tells you that they outscored Cuala before you convert the goals to points. And there's so many gilt-edged chances that they missed. Sean Brennan made a couple of great saves, as Sean Brennan does. But these are situations where you shouldn't be letting the goalkeeper have a hope of saving it. And like, as I'm watching the game, I'm saying to the person beside me, St. Bridget's are going to, eventually they're going to lose this game because of that. And that was exactly how it panned out. They just could not finish their goal scoring chances. Last 5 minutes of the game, Cuala just kept cool and just knocked the ball over the bar. Just kept doing it and took the goal chances when they were there. And at the other end, then St. Bridget's were snatching at opportunities. And it is St. Bridget's own fault that they lost the game. There's no getting away from it. David Tracy, he was excellent. Keane O'Callaghan was back full back. And, when you see Keane there, you're pretty much safe. St. Bridget's had the goal chances, but Keane has a presence when he comes back in there. Con was up full forward. Probably take a few more weeks for him to get fully sharp, because obviously the hurley was out of his hand for most of the year. Got a few points as the game wore on. But yeah, definitely Cuala, still not at 100%. But one of those things where, like last year, got battered by Nafina in the group stages, down by 12, and then got a couple of goals late on to sort of take the bad look off it. Cuala are still in the championship and can improve. So there's that opportunity to improve. We talk about Ballyhale and their championship. Cuala could still kick on from here. But there still has a lot of improvement has to be made for that to happen.
It's funny you say a lot does rest on Con settling in over the next couple of weeks and showing better form. And I do think it would be really interesting if he did get on a run and if Cuala did win a county title, that he would be, pretty well rested from the county this year by all accounts, particularly in comparison to other years. So who knows? Maybe this is the year that we might see the Cuala Ballyhale thing eventually happen, and the boat will go on get the momentum built up after maybe a quiet start in their county campaigns, and it'll reach a crescendo for a big Leinster clash at some stage. But it's definitely something we all want. Funnily though, from Bridget's point of view, having pushed Cuala so closely, they're now out of the championship, which must be an absolute sickener for them. For a team that's been at finals and semi-finals in recent years, they missed their opportunity, and they'll be kicking themselves off all winter, I'm sure.
Yeah, they did so much right. They really did. Like Keane O'Sullivan was brilliant corner forward. Paul Winters, he kept the ball moving well. There was plenty of guys who really impressed me in that game, but they just couldn't convert those goal scoring opportunities. And when you're against a team that is experienced and knows how to get over the line in games, that's often going to cost you. And it just almost seemed inevitable as the game wore on. Kilmacud Crokes, they hammered Thomas Davis by 15 points, 126 to 14 points. And they've been incredible going through the group stages there. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago how at the start of the game against Bridget's, they were 2-2 to a point behind and absolutely battered Bridget's for the rest of the game. So they're not going to panic in that sort of situation. Ballyboden, they beat Scully Connell very, very well. Plunkett's, they saw Fogs by 5 points. In the other groups, St. Jude's in Group 2, they won 125 to 114 against Tanta. Lucan beat St. Vincent's, 4 points between those two teams. Crave Kieran beat Whitehall Columkill with a lot to spare, and Nafina, they beat Ballantyre St. John's by 118 to 12 points. So, as I said, that's the quarterfinals, and it'll certainly get interesting now the next day out. Ballyboden against Cuala will be very good. I think, generally, I would say in the games that I've ever played in Dublin, they are the most physical games against Ballyboden. They're bruising games, and I mean from both teams, the way that they approach those games. They're great games to be involved in.
The quarterfinal pairings are, seriously intriguing because the one-sided nature of the group stages that we talked about already is gone. And there's not, I don't really envisage a one-sided quarterfinal. And I would say as well, from a Lucan and a Crave Kieran point of view, like they're probably a little bit lower down the pecking order of that last 8, and it's a massive opportunity for them to get into the semi-final. And then, they're only that's a huge game, I think, because if you look at the pecking order, probably between it's probably Nafina, Crokes, Ballyboden, Cuala. Those 4 are probably ahead of the rest. And that is a massive opportunity, you'd say, for probably the 7th and 8th teams in Dublin to get into the last 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's it for the
just one thing, Shane. Like we didn't talk enough about Desi Hutchinson's performance in the Waterford County final. Like the score 1-9. I think it was Conor McKeown tweeted yesterday after about 10 minutes that Desi Hutchinson had the Man of the Match award wrapped up after about 10 minutes of the game. He was on a different planet yesterday. I think Darren O'Sullivan said he was scary, and the fact that they think he's only going to get better and better in time, and his age profile would suggest that as well. Coming back from a soccer background too, to score 1-9 from play in a county final, and his movement and just how elusive he was, that has to be one of the great club performances. I would still go on record as saying the best club performance I've ever seen was Owen Larkin against Ballyhale Shamrocks in the Kilkenny county final. I'm going to say it was 2011, I think it was. There was a replay where literally I was looking at him unbelievably closely, and I didn't see him put a foot wrong the whole day. Every flick, one time he went for a pickup, it seemed to end up in his hand. Every free hit went over the bar, from my recollection. But it'd be interesting to get just quickly other people's views of what the great club performances are, the best they've ever seen. Was there anything stand out in particular for you that you've seen, either at Boris, Cuala, or otherwise?
Well, I think when Conn O'Callaghan scored 4-3 against Boris Kilcotton back in 2016 and announced himself to the wider public, I think that was pretty brilliant. Brendan Maher against St. Thomas's or Ballygunner, take your pick there. Other people, get your comments in quick there, because I actually want to bring up another tweet here. I think this is a really good one from @LeishaMan. Shane Saint, I have one for you. Camross won the minor championship in Laois on Friday against Abbey Leaks with only one score from open play, which was actually created after a 21-yard free was saved. This was Camross's only score from play in the game, a record. Now that is quite something, isn't it?
Jeez, I'd be surprised if it wasn't a record. That's usually we talk about, a beaten team. Sure, killed them that they couldn't get a score from play. It's very rare the winning side would get one score from play. And as I say, if it came in a roundabout way from a place ball, then essentially all their scores were from place balls. It's like saying, when someone scores a penalty, if it's saved and then it's a rebound, it's a penalty. You didn't create a goal scoring chance, I would say.
Yeah, Joe Butler says Owen Larkin came on as a sub yesterday for the Village. First touch, impeccable still. Yeah, he is absolutely brilliant. First touch. We'll do a debate about first touches another day, will we?
Yeah, I think we will. I don't think me or you will be in the conversation.
And we certainly won't. By the way, the winner of the Benetti menswear competition, which was run in association with Orga, orgaretro.com, is Patrick Hickey from Clare, regular commenter. And
Patrick.
It was just sheerly down to the volume of comments that you had to win it. So, Patrick, I'll send you, I'll message you privately, or you message me privately, and we'll get you the code over so you can order whatever jersey you want.
He'll hardly get a Clare jersey.
You never know.
Pick a Clare jersey.
You never know. Just a reminder, please do subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. Helps the channel grow. Really would appreciate that. Bottom right-hand corner of the screen over there if you're on YouTube. But I'll obviously also follow on all the other channels too. A reminder, if you want to get the audio podcaster at patreon.com/ourgame. $5 a month there. I'd really appreciate that. Couple of last comments in there. Patrick Hickey, he's seen it. Just message me there, Patrick, and we'll sort that out for you. And Traumspieler, great club performance. Francis McInerney versus Kilkee, Clare County final 93. I think unreal player. Joe Canning any day for Portumna. Joe Cooney likewise. Sarsfields. Joe Canning that day for LIT. The one that you talk about a lot.
Yeah, that was savage. There was a couple actually. There was a Fitzgibbon final, and there was a Waterford Crystal match against Waterford, I think, as well. But club performances, Joe Cooney would have had a couple of monstrous ones as well. Brian Wheelaton won man of the match in the first 3 Club All-Irelands that he played, which is fairly phenomenal as well.
Yeah, Joe Cooney against Toomey Barra. That would certainly be up there. Right, that's it for the Hurling Show on Our Game here. We'll be back again on Thursday. Plenty more hurling talk. Get your comments in, like, share, comment, the whole lot. Chat to you later, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.